over there, Mike, why don't you raise your hand? He'll be doing some additional drainage analysis for us as we go along, such as future runoff and stuff with the C value, or what we call the value changing on obviously when there's vegetation, water comes off at one rate. When it's now in dirt, type of mixture will come off at a different rate. So I did want to point out, just giving you a feel for what operations is doing. So today we had 15 people out in the field, broken up into 4 teams. So we had 4 activities ongoing. One was a water management group. Oh, and I'm remiss, I did not mention the state dam engineer is also here, and he's lead on my water management group. They were up there looking at the reservoirs, determining how we can avoid as much water as possible into the West Salt Creek drainage. We had a group from the Forest Service placing a new weather station up top to give us feel for rainfall events. We had a group that included the USGS folks that were continuing to do site recon, getting as many eyes on the event as we could. And then we had a group, including myself, that with the Army Air National Guard that you may have seen a Black Hawk flying around. We went up to the top. We evaluated a position for a camera today, which we'll place tomorrow. We also evaluated a place. One of the other things we're going to do is we have an unmanned aerial vehicle that we'll have up there flying to give us more survey data. The more data we can gather. This data, I'm sorry, I'm going to flip it back. This came off a satellite flight from this morning. So, and I do not know if it's the ones that were redirected. There were some satellites that were redirected purposely to look at this, or if it's a standard one. But we're bringing all the and our grid system is a system that we use to know where we have folks, where we're evaluating, and where we're finding pieces that we want to be careful of. As mentioned by the USGS, we still consider this a little bit of an active slide. We're still seeing some debris movement. We're very conscious of where we may see some cracking and settlement up above. And we're very conscious, and we want to look at that debris block. That's our main focus emphasis right now. Once we gather the data, we'll be doing some modeling on that to try to make predictions as to what would happen under various scenarios there. As mentioned, our concern started with day one when we got in the helicopter and got up there and started seeing water come in behind the debris block. First off, there's a big debris block up there. Jeff, I'll probably get it wrong. What's your estimate on height of that thing on the lower side?
The block is
yeah.
500 to 600 feet.
Yeah, 500, 600, and on the other side, 200 plus? 150. So anyway, we have and it basically bridges the entire draw, which is about 3/4 mile at the head, so maybe not quite 3/4 mile, but give you a feel for the size of the block we're talking about that came off the rim and dropped into the basin. Behind that, we immediately noticed with the snow melt runoff that we had a lot of water coming in. Bottom side of that, we had no water coming out. We got a 2,000-foot elevation change from 9,600 to 7,600, and we're loading it with a lot of water weight, 64 pounds per cubic foot, simply, and it's not coming out, and it's a lubrosity on this block. So that was what drove our concern to say we need to pull back initial search efforts. That being said, those that saw the block up there today, we took some extra time to go back through the bottom of the field. We had 8 sets of eyes on that, again, evaluating, as the sheriff said, we are not giving up on recovery operations. So every time we go up there for a technical operation and we're in a helicopter, we will be taking time also to continue to evaluate and look for evidence in the debris field. We will continue gathering data, as mentioned. Our task right now is real-time camera, UAV overflights that give us great centimeter plus data on what we've got there. We are working, and I'll be the first to say, as the sheriff said, we're trying to outsmart a mountain. We are working hard on getting those GPS receivers on that face, but I'll be the first one to tell you that's a very hazardous job, and we are only going to do that when we feel it's safe to do that. That debris field is very loose fluff in places, many downed trees in other places, saturated in some spots, not in other spots, water behind. It's not something that if we do decide to get somebody out there to set these GPS receivers, we want to cover all safety precautions before we do that. So that being said, by tomorrow we are anticipating having real-time eyes on it, which will give us a good feel. We'll have a camera that will be broadcasting image, and we're hoping to have another UAV overflight, weather cooperating, which will give us real good data. We actually flew the bottom, I believe, on the day of Memorial Day, and we have great data on that. And all this data helps us with the folks that we're turning it over to in Golden for the modeling to give us a risk assessment of what do we have left, what's going on up here, and what can we expect. And I know that's the biggest question for all you guys. Not the biggest, but that is one question for all you guys. I should not be remiss in saying I knew Clancy well. He was an amazing person. He worked for Public Works, which I'm the director of, underneath Road and Bridge, and it's a great loss, and I want to echo what the sheriff said. Although I did not know the other two individuals, I know this community and the type of people here, and know that just from what is going on, that these were great individuals, and I want to echo that. Part of what I'm doing here and why I'm putting long hours in and everything is to work through that too. So,
Did you mention the Ross thing, so would you enter the ring?
yes. If I did, I think I mentioned weather gauge. We have a brand new one up top. Obviously, we're in some challenging conditions, but that's not stopping us. Obviously, snow melts on, so we can't get snowmobiles in there. And it's a little bit soupy up top for ATVs, but we had guys push forward and get a rain gauge as close as possible, which our hydrologists are going to use to help. I will say this also, a couple of the local community members down closer to there, we may be contacting you about just putting a more simplified rain gauge in the area and asking you to read it after an event and maybe calling to us, but we'll be contacting folks on that. Again, we're after gathering the scientific data and evaluating what's there and then running the best models. But again, I would react to what the sheriff said. We are trying to outsmart a mountain, which we all know is a tough thing to do. So with that, I'll turn it back to Sheriff, and we'll go from there.
So before I introduce our emergency manager to talk about sort of what early warning systems would look like, you heard that everything that's going on to try to understand how to measure, how to monitor, how to assess, and what's going to happen. And so these are the questions that we don't have for you, is what does it look like when a slide occurs, if a second slide occurs. And that's what we're trying to get at. That's why we've brought to bear all these resources. I do think, though, there is room for us to talk a little bit about some common thoughts among the group. Is for those of you that live in the town of Colburn, we are going to have different warning systems that have 3 tiers, essentially. You'll hear about that from Salt Creek down to 330, from that point down to town, and then from town beyond. One of the things that it seems to be, and again, I have to be careful because we don't have these answers, but if there's an event of a slide, we believe probably the scenario that would occur here in town is an increase in water in Plateau Creek, not a debris field that would be down here. So in some sense, I hope that gives you some comfort, because Colburn has dealt with water events for years, right? And you have had Plateau Creek flooded, and Pete has been very connected with this community in that. When you start to back up, though, into up to Salt Creek and then all the way up Salt Creek, these are answers that we just don't have. We've got to get the modeling done to understand that. So you're going to hear from us, and as much as it's frustrating to you, it is also frustrating to us that we can't predict for you what another slide would look like, how far it would go. Would it be more or less of an event than we've already had? And but what we want to do is start telling you how we want to make warnings in the event that something starts to happen, and we get the opportunity to do that. So I'm going to have Andy talk about that with you. The only thing I'll finally say is that any kind of a water event, one of the things that we've really learned from the other flood events that have occurred around in the state of Colorado is we suggest that people don't get in your car and attempt to drive out of a flood. The first thing you should do is run to high ground. And that's good advice this time of year, even if we weren't talking about the slide, okay? So I'm going to have Andy Martzoff. I think I called him Martinez earlier. I'm sorry if I did that. Andy Martzoff from the Mesa is our Mesa County Emergency Manager, talk about early warning systems. And again, I did mention to you that our real challenge will be, once we get monitoring in place, trying to determine what triggers us to trigger a early warning system. And these are answers we probably don't have yet, but nevertheless, we're going to talk about those systems and how they work.
Thank you. First, I want to say that Mesa County is certified by the National Weather Service as a storm-ready community. And part of being a storm-ready community means we have to have multiple communication paths to warn citizens of events like flash floods, severe storms, things like that. So what we've been doing the past couple of days is working with both the National Weather Service and the 911 Communications Center to establish predefined warning areas. And as the Sheriff Hilke alluded to, the first priority area is the Salt Creek Road area immediately below the slide. So we've created a predefined warning area both within the 911 call center's system that pushes what we call reverse 911 messages. And we've also created that same warning area in the National Weather Service system. What we're also working on is creating secondary and tertiary warning areas that extend down to the town of Colburn, so that's to 330 down 65, and including the town of Colburn. And then a third area that would go all the way down Plateau Creek to the confluence with Colorado River. So it's kind of a tiered warning system that we're working on. So when we work together with both of those agencies, what we get access to it as far as warning is, again, the reverse 911 system, and Kate Forrest is going to talk to you a little bit about that. But when we work with the National Weather Service, we get access to NOAA Weather Radio. I was made aware today that NOAA Weather Radio reception is acceptable in this community. We I distributed 5 NOAA Weather radios to your town manager to put in community buildings or buildings where people are likely to congregate, and it's at their discretion where they place those. So when the Weather Service issues a warning, it will activate the klaxon in the radio, and anyone in that room or building should be able to hear it, and it will obviously switch to a voice and give guidance on what to do. And again, in an event like a flash flood, the call to action is going to be head to higher ground. It's not going to be load your car and try to drive out 330 and 65 to the I-70. That's probably the worst thing you can do. We also gain access to the emergency alert system. And that's a system that gives us the override on television and radio